Good afternoon. How is everybody? So, our friend Michael may or may not be on. We're going to wait and see how how this shakes out, since he's the only one of us between he and I that works for an actual living. So I am not quite sure if he'll be on or not, but we're gonna wait and kind of play it by ear. But we do have our guest for today, who is Representative Gabe Woolley. And we're going to bring him on here and have a visit with him about what's going on at the Capitol, kind of like we did with Representative Jim Shaw this morning. We're just kind of checking in with our new people to see what they think about what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in our friend, Representative Woolley. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm fine. It's very nice right now, but I hear we're going to get more rain tonight. So who knows what'll happen to the farm after more rain. But for right now, we're all stable here.
All's well, yeah.
So what's going on with you?
Well,
how are you doing?
We are making those adjustments as freshmen, kind of getting used to the process of the legislature here in the state. I would say, some things are what we anticipated and several things are not, as we necessarily anticipated. It's an interesting perspective when what it kind of is from the outside versus when you get on the inside and realize, oh, okay, these processes are a little different. It's not like Washington, D.C., where it's Democrat versus Republican. Here on the state level, it's more Republican versus Republican, and the Democrats are kind of just on the sidebar over there, screaming once in a while about something and kind of running out the clock, and then we just let them say their piece and move on because there's only like 7, maybe I think 15 of them in the House of Representatives out of 101 of us, as far as the Democrats. So a lot of it really comes down to Republican versus Republican, which is interesting. I certainly knew that for the state of Oklahoma that it looked that way too, but I think the average person that doesn't follow politics too closely probably thinks that we're up in DC right now, actually.
Well, and I do think there is some of that. I mean, I do find that to be a little frustrating, is that people don't even know who their state reps are. They're like, you mean Stephanie Bice? You're like,
Yeah.
No, that's not who we're talking about. She's actually not here in the state.
Right. Yeah, it is. There's been kind of a lack of engagement. I do think there is an increase in engagement lately as we've gone through these past few years, from the national level trickling down. We have seen it, but that's kind of a slow process. There still certainly is a majority that I would say feel like don't get out to vote, especially if you're on a special election.
Yeah. So just in your particular area, and then I want to back up on some other things, but because we're on this topic, in your particular, well, and like Dorn says, Republicans versus rhinos, which is, I think, almost, but I'm not sure. Am I a rhino? Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's a platform for Republicans, right?
Right.
So if I'm the one following the platform, am I the rhino then? I mean, it seems to me like all of these nameplates are getting confusing.
It does get complex. I guess it depends what your definition of maybe a conservative is. I mean, I've heard people say it before. My kind of position on conservatism is, what is it you're trying to conserve? Me as a conservative, what I think I'm trying to conserve family principles, that the family unit is the most important form of government established by God on earth, and that our systems are made to revolve around the family unit, the family structure, around life, around community, and that structure that God had set up, and that we build a society from there. But that's my argument of what's conservative. So if I feel, maybe it doesn't revolve around those conservative principles of the nuclear family, of which is an aspect of that I would argue is prioritizing the well-being of your home, whether that's your physical home, your state, your county, or your nation first above others, like sort of this America First principle. I mean, that's a family conservative principle, in my opinion. Take care of get your own home in order first, before you're pointing fingers elsewhere, trying to save the world. So it depends what your definition of conservative is. When we get into those topics of, I guess, rhino, not rhino.
That's so interesting that you say that, because every time I think conservatism is, immediately my thought is conserving power to the people, which means, limited government. So you can't do what we are doing right now, which is it's government tyranny, over the individual. We need to flip that on its head. But it is interesting because I like what you said. It's not that I didn't understand that principle kind of innately, but I've never thought about it like that. I kind of appreciate that. That's excellent.
Yeah, well, the example you give doesn't really differ from that anyways. I think that's rooted in sort of that family structure.
No, but it doesn't stress the family as much, and I like your stress there.
Yeah. Rooted in the people, like God has established you as the government of your home, as the parents, right? And you're a member of your community, and your children and yourself go out and learn from that community and soak up everything around you. So what type of community do you want to be in? Do you want to have your children exposed to? So it is, sort of this power to the people. And it is supposed to be this representative form of government, a constitutional republic where we elect our officials. We have aspects of, but we're not. And so I think it goes hand in hand with the idea of conservative family government, going in with power to the people hopefully being the families of Oklahoma.
I love that. Terry wants to make sure he knows that he said hi.
Hello.
And Tammy, I think she's trying to say, and I'm not sure, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tammy, but Oklahoma. And I think that's another frustration that I have, but I'm getting away from the topic I wanted to start with, which is kind of your background. But let me just say this, or let's kind of bounce this off. The federal government is supposed to have a small, limited role in our lives. It's supposed to be the state government that has I was going to say it one way. I'm going to say it like this. The state government is there to protect our liberty from federal overreach, for sure. And just on state overreach as well. So what you said a second ago, about what people think, I think we've got to retrain them to understand that where we're sitting right now in the state of Oklahoma is more important to Gabe and Jenny than it is to anything else, right?
Yeah, I think a huge strategy to it, whether you could say this is on a spiritual level, or maybe people are aware of it and they're intentionally doing it, but one way or the other, there's an enemy out there that's trying to make us complacent, and give out so many free handouts, and that the government will solve your problems for you. So you just sit back and shut up and reelect, and the government does everything for you. And then those strings that are attached get tugged on, and you owe the government something at some point. We've just become very comfortable with that. Even Republicans, that's not even a party line thing anymore. Just being so comfortable with things, and therefore being complacent with how things are. If we truly started to actually strip away a lot of the services and things that the government is offering that have come so far from how it was originated, everybody, regardless of Democrat or Republican, would be very uncomfortable and probably start protesting, because we've come so far, we've become so reliant on it, we wouldn't know what to do without it.
Well, that's one reason why I like you right there. Okay, so one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, because I knew you before you ran, because we've had you on the show before as a teacher.
Mhm.
And so, and I was quite impressed by the the stuff you were telling us at the time. I think you were probably one of the first ones that made me speechless. Because if you missed our video with our interview with, um, let's see, it was Trent Luce on Wednesday, and then this morning it was Representative Shaw. And I think the goal now is to see how shocking of a truth you can come up to make me speechless. Because
Got it. Challenge accepted.
yeah, so we were up to 4, I think, with Trent. So I'm just letting you know. But you, I think, were one of the first ones to make me speechless because of some of the stuff that you were telling me about that was going on in Tulsa Public Schools. But even before we get to that point, I want you to go back and talk about kind of a bit about your background, because I don't know that all the people that are on here today really kind of know that much about Gabe Woolley. So talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, no, that's a good place to start. It's interesting because I used to talk so much about my background before I was in office, and everyone would talk about it too as they were digging into things. And then I got into office, and I kind of stopped getting invited onto podcasts and to speak at events all of a sudden. Which
You're
is
always
weird.
invited here.
Yes, that's true. I used to do types of interviews all the time on certain things, and it kind of stopped. I don't know. Maybe God's just telling me to focus on certain areas, and it will pick up at some point when it's the right time. So, but yeah, I'm a teacher. I was an educator for 9 years, a combination of being a full-time teacher's aide and a teacher. I struggled very much in my own school, almost dropped out of high school, was heavily bullied, 5th grade all the way to senior year. Was going to drop out, but had an opportunity to actually transfer to a quick online school and test out, and just started working and didn't like school. And I did end up finishing high school. I went to Broken Arrow High School, and I kind of floundered for a little bit, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And about 4 years later, I did decide to go to college, but I went on a missions trip to Haiti, and we worked with some orphans. And I realized I like working with youth and with families and with people in the community, and try to bring that sense of family and community, rather, because these were orphans. But then I continued to work with children at a summer camp, and then I decided to get into this program for education. Now, granted, that program was more left-leaning, and I was more of an ignorant 19-year-old. I didn't know anything about it politically. I just thought it was an education program that you do. Now I've actually put in some work to try to kind of get that organization out of Tulsa, because I've realized, as I've become more politically aware, it's not a great program as far as its politics that they try to bring in along with their tutoring services.
Yeah.
And so did education for 9 years. The last 2 years, I really kind of felt like the grace that God gave me to be an educator was kind of starting to wear off, and meaning I was trying to maybe time to transition to something else.
Yeah.
So I kind of kept my prayers open and eyes out for something new as I continued my last 2 years in school and working in schools in Tulsa, and started getting more involved politically. I did move away just for 2 years, 1 year to Florida, 1 year to Phoenix, because I wasn't sure. I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do at that point. Other than that, it's been Oklahoma, except for after I was 5 years old. So I've been in Oklahoma for 18 years, I guess, if you subtract those 2 that I wasn't here. I got fired in Florida for not being vaccinated for COVID-19. Went to Phoenix, taught for a year. Came back to Oklahoma, realized I really love Oklahoma. Kind of figured out how much you like something once you don't have it. And so came back, started teaching again. Got more involved, started going to school board meetings, started getting involved in my GOP city council meetings. Then people started asking me if I ever considered running for office.
Well, let me back up though. What made you decide that you wanted to get involved in the GOP or going to school board? Or what was kind of the impetus for that?
Well, I didn't necessarily come knocking on the government's door saying, let me in, let me be a part of this. The government came knocking on our door, unexpectedly in 2018. My parents had legal guardianship of their 2 grandchildren, Clayton and Elijah, while my sister was in a Christian drug rehab program. She abused drugs while she was pregnant with the boy, so they had some health problems. But Elijah, at 14 months old, died in the middle of the night in his crib. And my parents were falsely accused of murder and child abuse because of that by the Wagner County Sheriff and District Attorney, who are still the Sheriff and District Attorney at this time, Sheriff by a slim margin. We almost flipped that seat. But so they went to jail for about 6 months, for crimes they didn't commit. They were released. All charges were dropped in 2021. But Child Protective Services, Oklahoma DHS, never gave Clayton back, and still to this day hasn't. We just surpassed 7 years. We entered the 8th year of Clayton being gone. So,
and he was taken when he was 6 or 5.
5, and so he's 12, or well, almost 13, about 13. God, so that's been a rude awakening. Again, that was the government kind of banging on our door and exposing their corruption right to our faces. And I think a wake-up call for God to kind of get off the couch and get involved a little more than just voting. So, by the time I ran for office for the House of Representatives, our name was kind of out there because there was a documentary that was made by Red River Creative Media by Janelle Batts and Kevin Batts. The documentary is called Saving Clayton. It's free on YouTube if you want to watch it. There's also rescueclayton.com for the website and the podcast, the Rescue Clayton podcast. And that kind of got our name out there. That circulated text messages, billboard signs. It was all an effort to get the word out there. Hey, we've got a problem. We are trying to get my nephew back, my parents' grandson. It wasn't really until we started being louder and talking to the media that charges were dropped and my parents were released from jail and things like this. So we kind of had to start finding a platform to scream things a little louder, because if no one else is aware, the government's doing plenty of things under the table that they would just like to keep under the table that people simply aren't aware of. All the elected officials up and down, local, all the way up to the state out of Wagner County are all Republican, so all is well is sort of the attitude. But we at the end of the day, I hope people remember to measure someone by their character and by their heart, not simply by the R or the D, by their name, by their voter registration. It goes deeper than just political party. So I ran for the House of Representatives. We had probably somewhere close to 10 senators and representatives over the course of the years help us to some degree with our case. And so I decided to get in that fight and be involved and try to make sure that I could do everything I can to make sure we better the system and that this doesn't happen to other families. So I ran a few bills. They didn't have any retroactive language to them to benefit Clayton or my own family. They were more of, here's a problem I experienced. Let's make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. Those bills weren't allowed into committee. I did get 2 big ones to reform DHS laid over, so they're not dead, but they weren't voted on. So we can run them again next year and work on them.
Wait. So you didn't really get any hearings on your bills either?
No, they only allowed 1 bill into committee. I had ran a bill that would require the history and the reality of communism be taught in 6th through 12th grade. They let that one in and killed it in about 5 minutes. The other 7 bills, they never let into committee. So 2 of them being the DHS reform bills. Those did get laid over, though, so they were never voted on. I guess I technically stepped into the committee to ask the chair to lay them over, which was strategized ahead of time. So, but they were not allowed through. They didn't make it to the floor, any of that.
I wanted to make a point here. So far says, sadly, when the government comes knocking on our doors, we realize minding our own business doesn't cut it anymore. And Sandra's had many a run-in with the government with her particular business. So I know that she understands that. And it's sad because I don't think, well, neither you nor I want it to get that far. I mean, right? We don't want the government parking itself on people's porches and then them saying, oh my gosh, now I got to do something about it. I mean, we need them to get involved now.
Yeah. Be proactive about it before it happens to you. So I hope people learn from our story. Don't wait till it happens to them.
So we're almost, fortunately, honestly, I have never been so glad when the legislature starts to see the end of it in May, because it's like if you gave them even like 6 or 8 hours, God only knows what would happen. So I'm so glad that we sine die here in a small number of days. Really, the 24th, isn't it? The last day, or the 25th?
The last Thursday in May, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So this has been your first year, your first session. Do you have thought, I mean, because you did talk a little bit about, you think it's going to be one thing and then you find out it's something else. I think so many people who are watching this morning would like to know kind of your thoughts. We talked a little bit about that with Representative Shaw this morning too. What did you think versus what has actually happened?
Well, I didn't fully realize the process of some things, and perhaps I watched a lot of podcasts, and I got more involved, and I did interviews on podcasts and learned a little more about politics as I went. But then when you see it in front of you, you're like, oh, I kind of felt like I had that in the back of my head, but I didn't realize it was a thing. How much power and authority that the Speaker of the House has, or the Pro Tem of the Senate, and that they can appoint chairs of every committee, and that committee chair on their own authority for whatever reason they want can just hear a bill or not hear a bill, I think is ridiculous. I think that's totalitarianism rather than a constitutional republic or any aspects of democracy.
Wait, you mean we don't have a democracy?
Right. Yeah, we are not a democracy. We have
you giggle. But the problem is we keep getting, I have actually heard Republicans even say that, well, it's bad for our democracy. And you're like, where are you living?
Right.
Maybe we ought to talk about that country, since we're not a democracy.
Yeah, no, you're correct. You should have seen the Democrats when we were on the floor. I think it was with Christ is King resolution, where they twice said we are a democracy, and they twice said that the separation of church and state is in the United States Constitution. And I was just like, oh okay.
Well, in the Constitution.
Yeah, they said it was in the United States Constitution. I was like, please show me where in the United States Constitution it says the separation of church and state.
Well, I would actually, when we can get into a discussion on that, which might be an interesting discussion, but we'll do that in a little bit. But yeah, no, there's nothing in the Constitution about that. And as a matter of fact, if you knew anything about basic American history, you wouldn't, that would be the last thing you would think would be in the Constitution, would be that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, given our foundation. So,
did you teach history?
I did English and history for most of the 9 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, you were elementary, correct?
Yeah. I taught 6th grade 1 year, but for the most part, elementary school. Most recently was 5th grade English and history.
Okay. So let's talk about, the committee chairs and the power that they have over committees was something you weren't quite prepared for. What else?
Right. Well, I also didn't know that there were other processes that you could try to maybe revive a bill. I thought once our bills were dead, that was it. You could put language into another bill. You could convince an author to give you their bill, and with the same title, meaning it's a certain topic or category, sort of. There are other strategies that I've had to learn, and unfortunately learning them a little late as we're approaching the end of session, but I'll be able to have that in my toolbox for next year. So we have 2-year terms. So the first one coming as a freshman is going to be a lot of trial and error. We're trying to figure out and strategize ahead of time for what to do next year, what not to do, how things worked, how they didn't work. And so at this point, I'm to a place where I'm probably going to have my bills, at least some pre-version of them typed up, and pretty much go to the speaker and just tell me now what's going to be let through and what's not going to be let through, so I don't waste my time trying to represent my constituents.
Oh, well, now that's a good point, because that's another point we discussed with Representative Shaw this morning. So is it your contention that you work for the caucus, or you work for the people who elected you?
No, I work for the people of District 98 and for Oklahomans that voted and sent me to Oklahoma City to represent their interests, so long as it's in line with our Constitution, U.S. Constitution.
So You mean that when the caucus says, hey, we need to get together on this, and it doesn't necessarily represent your constituency, and you're bullied to go along with that, that's kind of a stinky deal, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there was some data that had come out not too long ago, kind of showing the trends of yes votes and no votes, and how things worked like that. I do the best that I can to represent what aligns with our conservative values, our Constitution, and what constituents are asking for in Oklahoma. There's certainly louder voices, but I bet you if you really surveyed every Oklahoman, it would look very different than what's coming out of the Capitol on most days. So.
Yeah, well, let's not get me started on that, because I really don't want to take up too much of your time for you. Because boy, yesterday was an interesting day. We've never done breaking news before on Rope Report, but we sure did yesterday after, we had a chairman of a committee say you can't videotape in his committee. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I heard about that. As well as the other bill, what is it, 2751, not making it through wind turbine setbacks?
Yeah. Yes. Correct. So, and now this is just from my perspective. So I'm not pushing this on you. I'm asking your opinion just from my perspective. I've not been able to read all of the bills, but there is one lady, Nancy McDaniel. Oh my goodness, that woman. I've never met a person who can read that much legislation in my whole life. And we're in a little group text where she'll run down, just like put a little synopsis about the bills, and I'm reading these things thinking to myself, I'm not really sure that we're covering the aspect of protecting personal liberty. It seems like we're protecting big business.
Yeah, a lot of the legislature is focused on two economic things and businesses, and of course we want to see Oklahoma thrive, and we want to be successful in many areas, and there is the aspect of that, so we can have the revenue with tax dollars. And but we've come a long way from what it was originally for, both on the national level and on the state level. We've seen a lot of pieces of legislation that are legislating more local control issues. We've seen a lot of legislation that is kind of just a sunset bill, just extending further something that was supposed to expire. I feel like without taking a close enough look as to did it really work or not work before we extend this thing. But
okay, well, let me stop you right there, because this is a weird thing that you bring up, because most legislators don't bring that up. So God love you for bringing that up. I saw all those sunset bills, and they're on a cycle, right? So part of the reason why they would come up is because I think it's a 3-year cycle or something. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember. Anyway, there were a bunch of them that came up, and I got to thinking about it, and I thought, and the one that got my attention was the OERB, the Oklahoma Energy Resources Board. And that functions so much like a private organization that I keep wondering why it's a governmental ancillary at all. And so I started looking into that. And did you know that there is a whole section of Oklahoma law on what you must do to continue, not sunset? Sunset, you just go, we're done. Do you know that there's a whole section of law with a full prescriptive, like 12 prescriptions for what you have to do to continue an organization instead of sunsetting it?
I'm not super familiar with that, no.
Yeah, see, I don't think anybody else was either. And I started making comments about that, and I got a couple of legislators to go, oh, well, this is a problem. So,
Yeah.
how is it that we do things there? The whole idea of the legislature is, well, it's to protect our liberty. That's the whole job. There is no other job. It's just you protecting the liberty of the people that elect you. So how is it that it has become more about, I have to write legislation. If I write legislation, that's what makes me an important person, is writing this legislation. But then they don't even follow the legislation that they write. It's like
Well,
they're writing their own, but don't realize that there's already a whole body of law out there that they don't seem to want to contend with.
right. Well, that's kind of the mindset that's been cultivated, that you're kind of a failure if you don't get a bill across. I've had to find other strategies as I didn't get any bills let in. There are other things you can do. I've spent a lot of my time debating against bad bills and signing on and debating in favor of good bills and questioning what we're even doing with our time. Like, there are other things that we can be done. I mean, and on the topic of sunset bills, one thing I'm starting to notice just at this point right now, we did sunset bill here, sunset bill there, but it just dawned on me maybe yesterday, the day before, with SB 460. Well, we're approving all these sunset bills, meaning you're just stamping the bill saying extend this. And the bills, nothing in the bill is amended. Like, as we have moved further in time, we probably should look, do we need to change something with this bill before we just push it through? We had Senate Bill 460, which
What is that?
it was it was certainly labeled as something that we want to hear. It was saying that natural gas is a priority in Oklahoma. But I was almost like, why isn't that just a House resolution? You're just making a statement, right? Like, where's the practical pieces of this legislation that shows it's a priority? There's no percentages in this bill. How much needs to be natural gas, and how far back should solar and wind be, and how much solar and wind can we have? Like, there are no SMART goals, which is, what is SMART goals? Specific, measurable, obtainable, forget the R and the T, but it has to have numbers. It has to, like, actually mean something. So I voted no on SB 460 because it had language in there that it was going to move the sunset on, meaning it's going to become active again because it expired in 2020. It was going to bring it back up, and it all it did was it just said that we're kind of like prioritizing natural gas. It was changing the language. One thing I kind of understood, it had the term fossil fuels, which they wrote back in the day because we used to have a lot of coal, but that's kind of more not the predominant source of energy. So it struck fossil fuels and changed it to natural gas, and that's fine. But line 17 on page 1, it says that we prioritize natural gas, but it also then says that we give way to wind energy and green energy, and this will be brought back because this language will be now extended. It was kind of dead in 2020, but they're extending the sunset. So my question was, if we're going to extend the sunset on this language and prioritize natural gas, why didn't you strike the term wind energy while you were at it, while you are in the process of bringing this forward and changing this law? Why didn't we strike that? I would have voted yes if they would have done that. But my other concerns with SB 460, what restrictions does this put on green energy? There were none in the. All it said was we prioritize. So I was like, okay, so according to the language of this bill, our state can be, as long as we're just 50.1% natural gas, we can be 49% wind turbines, and we're still prioritizing natural gas.
Fair.
There were no
enough.
measurements.
Yeah.
There were no measurements in the bill. So I voted no on it because I don't want us to become 49% wind turbine and green energy, and that we're still within the parameters of this bill. I just don't think that it was. I don't know what the point of it was. So other than that, it was allowing another gateway for the green energy to come through, because that language is literally put in there. It either doesn't need to be put in there, or it needs to say no or a restriction towards wind turbines. I just don't know. And then page 2, line 10 of the same bill allows for groups to, my understanding is it would allow for groups to plead their case to county commissioners. So if green energy wanted to get more of our land or wanted to have more of a priority, all they have to do is go lobby to the county commissioners. So it kind of left another gateway for them to do more with the green energy and less with natural gas, as long as they keep natural gas at that 50.1%. Like, it's just too vague. So things like this, like we're extending the sunset on this bill, and there's not any teeth or consequences or specifics. Like I said, I try to look at things with the SMART goal, which is an acronym. It needs to be specific, measurable, obtainable, and I forget again what the R and the T means off the top of my head. But as a teacher, I'm just like, if this were a lesson plan and I give this to my students, they wouldn't know what to do with it. Like it's just a statement that prioritizes natural gas. Well, that's great. Yes, we want to prioritize natural gas. I don't want to leave room for up to 49% of green energy. And it just simply could possibly allow for that to happen.
Well, it's funny that you say that. Well, I'm going to show this. John says green energy lobbyist was pushing it to gain more abilities to force the green energy scam. And I think that I would imagine that's probably true, especially after yesterday. But I don't know if you remember Sally Kern, but Sally Kern was a legislator during the time that we were doing Common Core, and she had a kind of the same similar thing that you do. She had a metric by which she would examine every bill, and one of them was, does it follow the Constitution? Does it provide personal liberty and freedom? Does it, and she just had this list, and she would examine every bill, versus that list, and it was like, and it made so much sense. And then Dorn says, relevant and time bound.
There it is. Relevant and time bound.
Becky, good for you.
I guess if it's a sunset bill, it'd be time bound by its nature. So there's that. It had that. Yeah. It had the T. So.
Very good. Legislation needs metrics to measure and establish baseline data. And so that goes back to the other comment I was going to make, which was, during the Common Core, when we were trying to fight Common Core, all of Obama's 4 changes for education that were all pushed by the Republican legislature and a Republican governor and a Republican state superintendent, all of those pushed the Obama 4 pillars because there was so much money attached to it, right? And it was all forced into an omnibus bill. Would you like to know what the title of the omnibus bill was?
Sure.
Teacher incentive pay.
Okay.
So if you title it teacher incentive pay, and then people are like, oh yeah, teacher incentive pay. And then they're not really paying that much attention to, they're picking things out. But yes, it was a one line, I think it was line 33 on page 6 or something, that instituted Common Core into state law in a teacher. I mean, come on. Which is why, and I say that to point out why what you're saying is so true and so, in my personal opinion, correct.
Yeah.
And Dawn Spencer's giving you the thumbs up, by the way.
Hello, Dawn. Good to see you. But yeah, this is just one example of a bill that I was like, what is this even doing? Like, there's nothing obtainable here other than opening the gateway to potential problems. You have to put some specifics into this bill. Otherwise, it's just kind of free game and does nothing. We postured and made a statement. Great. Who cares?
Okay, so I'm going to go into a little more interesting topic. So this was your first legislative session. What has been your first thought about this 2-tiered house system?
Well, there are, I'm still trying to figure out what to think about it, because there is the argument that the reason this is done, and so we're more careful looking at legislation, making sure not as many bills get passed, not over-regulating, and I could see that too. But then once we started the process and I saw what was happening, at least in the committees I was sitting in 2 of the committees, the DHS committee and one time and a couple times in the education committee that I sit on, is someone in the committee would always say, well, we'll deal with that problem later because it's going to move on, and let's pass it because there's another committee has to go through anyways, and they'll just deal with it. So they're passing the buck. So I was like, no, I'm in this committee right now. like the bill's in front of me right now, and it's my responsibility to represent my district. I'm not in that other committee. So we need to deal with the problem now and not pass the buck. Otherwise, I'm voting no on this bill because I have no guarantee that other committee is going to take care of the problem that's in the bill. But that excuse was used several times. So I kind of saw that two-tiered system that was potentially supposed to be for us to be more careful. When I would try to be more careful in committee, often the excuse would come up that we'll let the oversight committee just deal with it when it goes on to them.
And did you check to see if it had on any of the bills that went through your committee?
I'm not aware of on a couple of the bills that we looked at that anything. No, because a couple of them made it to the floor without what I was hoping to see. There was one that I really spoke up about too that did not make it to the floor. So I don't know if, of course, the floor leader and the floor team decides that too. So who knows why they ended up stopping that. There was a bill coming through, I think it was from a Democrat in education committee that was going to require teachers teach students about what's real news and what's fake news. And I said, no. Why is that appropriate based off of the teacher's perspective or political agenda or God knows what, to teach children what's fake news and what's real news? And I spoke up in committee about that. And I was very concerned about this bill. And Republicans and Democrats alike passed it. And occasionally I will speak up about one on social media in an effort to warn the people about, look, I gave this everything I had and it still passed, and just so here's my opinion and my perspective on it. And so I did that about this bill, and I laid out some details and some scenarios of how we just came out of COVID and how we were just censored on social media for what's truth and not truth, and now we're literally by law going to give way to this to happen in the classroom legally, so it can now be done. And I felt the need to speak up about that. I did receive some pushback on that because some people didn't like that I shared those details about what happened in committee. But I was just speaking for myself. Here's why I voted on this and why I vote no and why I'm concerned about this bill. So that's one example. I did not see that bill end up making it to the floor, so that's good.
So, but that's interesting that you tell me, because one of the things, well, let me say this really fast. Dawn says one committee is fine, two is a waste of time. It's either a waste of time or it's a specific way to kill the good things that are coming out of the first committee. And I'm going to assert that that's possibly a principle simply because of who all were on the second committees. Nothing but a way for one committee to blame the other. I think that's true. And another hoop to jump through, and more people be able to say it was their fault and not mine.
If you have this system, right, if you have point one, which is where a bill starts, point two is the committee structure, that two-tier committee, and point three is the floor, and you say that the reason we have this two-tier committee structure is to be extra careful, well, therefore, you should not question any bill that comes to the floor because it went through our trusted system. That's kind of my concern. It is like, well, we built up and praised this system that we have, and I'm not saying that. Who knows? I'm not in every committee. Maybe it probably was used as a great chance to stop some bad bills. I don't know. Like I said, I spoke up about some bad bills and I didn't see them make it to the floor, so I'm grateful for that. However, I am a little concerned about the sort of attitude that, well, we have this two-tier committee structure and we're being so careful, so therefore we should stop challenging things so much because it's been vetted through the system. I'm worried that bills are, it feels like, I can't prove this, it kind of feels like it's predetermined ahead of time what bills are going to make it through and what aren't, and we're just kind of doing the show until we get to that point, to an extent. I brought my bill to committee and it was very clear that it was strategized to kill this bill in committee. I mean, this person had this question ready to go. This person had a stack of papers and wanted to bring out this, like they were ready to kill my bill on teaching communism, to the history of communism, to 6th through 12th grade. Overall, I think the major argument where they got that killed is that we just need to put this into the rules for the State Department of Education and vote on those and not run legislation that manages the State Department of Education. And then immediately after they killed my bill, they passed the Democrat bill on teaching about fake news in education. which they could have also put in the State Department rules and done. Like their excuse for killing mine, they just went ahead and used it for the very next bill.
Well,
So,
we could even talk about the cell phone bill.
oh yeah, I voted no on that. Yeah.
Well, I know you did. I watched who voted on that, because you can't tell me you're for local control and vote for that stupid bill. There's no reason to have that stupid bill. That's why we have school boards. And I'm not going to get into it, but yes. Dorn says, and this was what I was going to ask you. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to stick this in. The details of all committee meetings need to be 100% public. Were the committee meetings that you were in not on the legislative video system?
As far as I know, they all were. The only thing
Okay.
that's not more broadcasted is caucus meetings that I know of. Or if someone, they have their own meetings that they just plan and do with their groups, that stuff. But all official meetings on the record are recorded to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. And Becky says, thank you for speaking up on that. What a waste of time, money, and effort. We already teach authors purpose across media and rhetoric as a whole. We have more bills moved through the one committee system, and I think there's something to think of then, or look at there. It sounds like the legislature needs to learn about the history of communism. Keep doing what you're doing, Gabe. I wish many more at the Capitol would follow suit. And I that is one of the reasons why I I keep following you. You are really putting their underwear in a bind, because they have been on you for the amount of time that you speak out about bills and that you post things about bills. And it frustrated me when we talked about that briefly. We ran into each other and we talked about that briefly. Why? And this is kind of a rhetorical question, especially after what happened yesterday with Chairman Grant Green, putting the kibosh on videoing in his committee. Why would anybody, any elected official at the Capitol, do you suppose, want to make you feel some bad about the fact that you're going out and exposing to the people who elected you what's going on in the Capitol?
Well, I would wonder if maybe some were worried about interpretation, like why one legislator did something is maybe a different legislator voted differently for a different reason, and so there's that aspect of it, and that's not necessarily wrong, but it could make maybe legislators look bad if you give a really good reason that catches the people's attention that they agree with, and then you pull that vote and you question, well, I agree with this representative's reasoning why they voted no, and then they look at all who voted yes. But then there's that aspect of, well, they must have voted yes because they're anti what I'm thinking, why I would have voted no on this. And that's not necessarily true. There are different reasons why people vote yes or no on something. There really needs to be more discussion around before we cast our vote, but they vote very quickly. I mean,
they
were so quick on the floor with a vote once that I couldn't make it to my button in time before they closed it. And then another bill, they drug it out for 10 minutes until they got the votes they wanted to get it passed. And they got 51, they barely got it, but they drug it out. It was clear that that bill was predetermined. We're going to make sure this bill passes. This other one, we're going to give the amount of time we're required to get, bare minimum we're allowed to give, and hope it doesn't pass. If you're going to leave the window open for voting, they need to decide as a House rule that there's a certain amount of time we leave the window open for everyone to cast their vote. I was frustrated though that I had 10 seconds to vote on this bill and we had 10 minutes to vote on a different one, because one was clearly prioritized over the other.
Well, and I do want to point out, I'm not sure if you remember this or not, but Julia and I were very, and a whole lot of other people, I'm not just saying Julie and I, but from this, group, we were very involved in, we did not want the tax credit for money to go to private schools. And when this was on the Senate side, and this was when we had, don't know why his name is slipping my the previous Senate Pro Tem.
Great treat.
Treat. This was when we had Greg Treat over there. And he was, of course, a huge proponent of this idea and this bill. They started voting on the bill. I believe they didn't get to start voting on the bill until, Julia can help me with that, at 9. I believe it was like 9. And it was like one of the last bills there. So a number of people had left. They left the queue open for voting, if I remember correctly, until 11 o'clock at night.
What? What? Wow. That's crazy.
Well, I mean, because if you're whipping a bill while it's supposed to be being voted for, you better make sure that those cameras are on, right? And leave that thing open. So I totally see what you're saying. I mean, that's completely, and I wanted to backtrack to another thing. There are a lot of voter indices that legislators, that organizations run on legislators. I mean, we all know this. Different conservative. There's some conservative indices. There's some others out there. One of the things that I don't like is in some of these indices, voting indices, they will have that a no vote or backup. It's hard to say. It's not a yes or no vote. It's I couldn't get to the button on time. I didn't vote on that issue. So, like, do you see what I'm saying? So, how do you even explain that? So, a misvote. Okay, that's a much better way to say it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Gabe. So, a missed vote makes a difference in the index.
Yeah.
You just said you missed a vote because they closed the queue too early.
Very quickly, yes.
So I think we all need to pay attention to that. So we're looking at indices, voter indices on our legislators. Make sure they're not considering a missed vote a yes or a no.
Yeah. And I move around on the floor a lot and talk with people. I mean, you if you're on the floor, if you're watching the floor, you can kind of see people. I move around quite a bit, but at this time, I missed the vote. I was literally sitting at my desk. I mean, that's how quick they closed it. And I was watching the board. I was reviewing my notes. And I looked down and the vote's closed. Like, I was literally right there. I mean, it was so quick. It wasn't even one of the times that I was across the room talking to someone and then getting back over. Of course, you can put your hand in the air on the floor too and let them know and they'll count your vote as well. But yeah, it was just so quick. And then a few weeks later, we have a vote that we leave open for 10 minutes. And I'm like, I don't understand. How is there not like a time like in the rules that you have to leave the vote open, the window open for the vote, and it has to be the same. It has to be the same, neutral for every bill.
Well, we learned that this morning. Did you hear the answer to that question?
No.
It's in this was the third time I think that they made me speechless this morning. Marvin Goodman, our friend Marvin Goodman, chimed in on the program this morning and said that it's in the state constitution that the legislature gets to make up their own rules. And so now you have the answer to your question.
Right. Yes.
So Julia said, yeah, it was 9 o'clock. And it was bad. We felt bad for poor Jake at that time. What are we doing for? Explain to me. I'm not sure. Help me out with that one. I just saw 4 and I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm not sure where we're going with that, Sean. So if you had looking forward, now I know we're not finished with the session. So I totally understand that, but you've been very good. Oh, okay. That's funny. Yeah. 4. Thank you. But you've been very good about explaining kind of your thought processes on this session and all that kind of stuff. What do you have a couple of things that just pop into your head and like this next session, this is something, this is either a no or a yes, or do you see what I'm saying?
Are you talking about for next year?
Yes.
Well, I have certainly learned things that I would do differently that I know now that I know more of the process. Like, I'm going to have to start seeking out some plan Bs early for my bills and finding other bills under the same title that I might need to move my language into if they don't let my bills into committee, and different strategies. And I need to make sure that I kind of whip my vote ahead of time with committee members and be like, look, before I even bring this to committee, are you going to vote yes or no? And what's the problem with it? What don't you like about it? And figure that stuff out. I didn't really come in knowing that stuff very much. And so there certainly will be a different strategy coming in. I'm trying to build relationships and, not burn bridges, but not compromise on principles. And so trying to figure out how that process works. There's some other things even beyond running legislation that I'm trying to work on. We're trying to work on some reform of DHS.
Yeah.
I've had some conversations with the governor, conversations with Jeff Cartmel, the new director of DHS. I have a meeting with him next week. I've had some conversations with Cindy Bird and different things you can do. Of course, I've been kind of put into this position where I've had to find other things to get to represent my constituents because I don't have any bills to run as far as my own bills that I authored. Yeah, there will definitely be a different looking probably strategy going in next year now that we've learned more, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can't do anything about it for next session, but 26 is an election year. And unfortunately, 26 session will be before the election will go down. However, it seems to me that we just start writing lists of all of the legislators who are more interested in having relationships than running the bills that your constituents ask you to run. And because we talked about that this morning with Jim Shaw as well, about the fact that, it's the one thing that seems to be lacking in understanding is that the caucus isn't elected. It's not an elected caucus. It's a group of individuals elected by individuals in their district. And the idea of, well, caucus believes this is what we're going to do, and caucus says this, and that's just flat wrong. It's flat wrong. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we had we've discussed wind turbines, and one of the consensuses there, I don't know how convinced I am of this to be true or not, is that, well, this half of the state wants wind turbines and this half of the state doesn't. I'm like, I really don't think that half of the state wants wind turbines. I don't think people are going out and saying, I can't wait to buy a house in the view of a wind turbine farm. Like, that's my selling point. But just I wasn't convinced of that. And so that we're just kind of caught up in our meeting about that discussion. And then it comes down to, we had some great legislation by Representative Jim Shaw. Some other representatives have some good legislation on setbacks and pushbacks against green energy that didn't get heard. And instead we come to this compromised version of the bill that wasn't really what I believe Oklahomans were wanting, the majority at least. And
but the wind turbine lobbyists, I'm sure, were super happy.
Yeah, I mean, this argument of property rights, they know how to play the game. Out of state groups, lobbyists and things, they know how to paint something in a conservative light and give it a very conservative name and find people to come lobby at the Capitol that look like your average everyday person. Who knows? I don't know if they're being paid. That I feel like I'm inclined to believe they probably are, or maybe they're not even Oklahomans. Slap a conservative label on it, don't question it, much like this piece of legislation that I had just talked about, prioritizing natural gas. That's a very conservative talking point. Yes, I want to do that, but let's get into the bill and please tell me what it actually does and where are the measurable restrictions within it. And there weren't any. And so I just feel like we're just kind of making things look conservative on the outside. And it's at the end of the day, if there's no teeth, no consequences to it, no very measurable, obtainable goal, then what's the point? But But generally, the public, a lot of people they can slap it on a mailer. Representative Woolley voted no on prioritizing natural gas. Like, that's the headline, right? But if you read the bill, arguably, I mean, it really isn't in any measurable, obtainable way prioritizing natural gas. And that's why, and that's a big reason too why I kind of publish occasionally. I'll publish, here's why I did this on a bill. So there's documentation of it. I mean, I had plenty of things used against me in my campaign that weren't true, and so I just started documenting things, and I can put a QR code on something, and here's the date, it's time stamped, and here's my explanation to it.
I actually think that's quite a bit of wisdom. John says western side of Oklahoma sick too. And then we've got Don asking about gardens. So, and do you have a garden, and what kind of seeds do you plant to get wind turbines to grow? And is humanure good for, I would imagine that humanure would be an excellent fertilizer for wind turbines, since it's all crap.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And just you talk about gardens. It's so interesting seeing some of the bills that get through, like pointless. There was some bill, I think, ran by a Democrat that had to do with giving money to allow for a garden to be paid for by tax dollars and somewhere in the city. And I'm just like, isn't like a city council group going to decide if they want to do that in their city? Here we have this legislation, but we had legislation that was going to have us learn from our history to prevent us from stepping into communism again. But no, let's talk about community gardens. Let's let that bill through.
Well, and then not only that, there was a request bill that was going to allow people to just be able to garden regardless of what the HOA said. And that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, because my gosh, we've got to have HOAs being able to play their little tyranny game.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing what makes it through and what doesn't make it through, and what the thought process behind is it.
How about use your own money to plant a garden? I think that's pretty good. And it is really smart documenting everything, because I do think, because that's exactly what they do, Gabe. I mean, they'll go, well, he didn't, because how could you vote no on a bill labeled teacher incentive pay?
Right. And I had posted, I was in the emergency room unexpectedly for a day, and I missed a whole committee meeting. And so I documented that, because I saw this used against my opponent. They questioned Dean Davis on how many votes he missed. And I documented that. I was like, I'm in the emergency room. I know I have committee today. This is why you're going to see 6 missed votes on a scorecard or something. I can't be, I'm in the emergency room. That stuff will be used against you somewhere down the road, so.
No, I totally get it. You're okay though, right? I mean.
Oh yeah, no, I'm good. We're good now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, and I was trying to think, there were even some other, the milk bill, we couldn't get raw milk sold.
Raw milk.
I think, and we talked about this a little bit this morning, but I think it's worth bringing it back up again. People don't understand the freedoms that they're losing. I mean, it's like they don't see them. If you want to drink raw milk, that should be up to you. Yeah. And if you want to sell raw milk, you should be able to sell as much raw milk as people will buy from you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we can have garage sales, right? And at the end of the day, that's a contract between the buyer and the seller, and they're choosing with their free will to take a risk or to do something. I mean, you can't collect rainwater in Tulsa. Like, it's crazy.
Well, you probably wouldn't want to, though, either.
Right. But just an example of just absurd government over-regulating everything. But it's all under the guise of it's for your safety. I'm the government, and I'm here to help, for your safety.
Well, and that's what we said about COVID. I am kind of surprised, though, that you were in Florida and you got fired for not taking the vax.
Yeah, I think I was working for a family that was specifically more liberal. It wasn't like an organization or something.
Okay. All right. Okay. Because I was like, but I thought that was the whole selling point of Florida.
I know. That's kind of the ironic part. Go to Florida and then you get fired for not being vaccinated.
I know. I was like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah.
Government should be 100% out of our business. Don says, I didn't have any government to find me when I did it wrong. I'm
That's
not
off the
sure.
grid.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where that went. But anyway, I think, and we touched on this kind of briefly this morning and kind of briefly here, but I would like to expand on it a little bit more. I don't think that people understand that the legislature has voted that they will not raise taxes unless a supermajority votes to do that, right?
Yeah,
And I
you have
don't
to have a percentage. Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So, but that didn't stop them from raising taxes. They just changed the name and called it a fee.
Or a bill can have a fiscal impact, which is tax money, but it's not a tax increasing bill. But like there was a bill for DHS. They wanted to have a software system up to date. At one point, it was said that it was going to cost $100 million. That's going to be tax money.
What?
Yeah, HB 1575.
$100 million.
Well, there are appropriations and budget committees. And if it has a fiscal impact, it's supposed to go through there. And then there's the other committees, more general committees, that if it doesn't have a fiscal impact, it goes to a policy committee. We're sitting on a policy committee, and then we get hit with House Bill 1575. And I asked in committee, because it was brought to my attention, I'm kind of texting a source, looking things up, paying attention to what's going on, doing some last minute work as we come up to the vote about this bill in the DHS, Child Protective Services Committee. And it's $100 million fiscal impacts that we get back from DHS. And I'm like, well, first off, this is in the wrong committee because we're not appropriations and budget. I wondered if maybe that was strategic, that we won't ask about the fiscal impact because we're not in a fiscal impact committee. That was my first kind of red flag. I'm not going to make that claim. I just wonder that. And then I found out it's $100 million, and then I text a friend, and they were like, DHS, according to Greg Treat, overspent by $100 million last year. Are they trying to balance their books for this year? Because the dollar amounts match. And I brought that up in committee, and that threw them off. They weren't expecting it. Then the bill got laid over to the next week. And I was like, surely we brought some reason here and questioned this and that this bill won't pass. Come back next week and they say, well, we're going to put the bill out for bids and get different bids from companies and get a lower price. So it probably won't cost $100 million. And I said, well, then how much will it cost? Like, well, we don't know. So it could still cost $100 million. So now we don't know what's going on. Committee passes the bill. I'm the only one that votes no, except for one Democrat. She voted no because she wasn't there the week before and didn't know what was going on. All the Republicans passed the bill out of committee. Bill makes it to the floor. I go to the floor. I go to the representative that's allowed to strike title. Strike title means you take the language out of the bill and you don't know what it's going to say, but it's still under that topic of DHS. I said, this bill, we were told, was going to cost $100 million. We were told they're going to put it out for bids. The price could change, but they have not told us the new price. So therefore, I'm going to assume it cost $100 million because they haven't proven otherwise. And I asked him, will you please strike title on this bill? Strikes title on the bill. The body passes the bill. I still vote no. The body passes the bill, goes over to the Senate. I don't know where it's at now, if the title's been restored. But I've been chasing down that bill all session. But that's just kind of an example of, I don't know. We're trying to be cutting taxes, and we have to have a certain process that we do if it's a tax increase. But when you attach $100 million of taxpayer money, 60 state, 40 federal, that's a tax increase. We have to pay for that. But it's not a bill that is actually, here's a bill to increase taxes for this reason. It's just the fiscal impact of the bill. But it still is increased. There are ways to get around the rules that they said, in other words. Long story short.
Well, and that's what we talked about this morning. And Sandra makes a really good point, because drinking raw milk endangers others. And so that leads me to another, and thank you for that, Sandra, because that leads me to another point, which is These people at 23rd and Lincoln talk about the free market and like they understand it, right? But the one thing they're going to do is stop a raw milk bill and an ability to grow a garden in your own yard, despite what a toxic HOA, tyrannical HOA is going to tell you they can do. And there were other ones out there. A free market would solve so many of these things because Julia says fee, license, fine, it's all just a tax. So if you know, we license people to get to do nails. We license people to cut your hair. We license people to do whatever. Well, you know what would solve the problem would be the free market. So if I go to a place and they do a crap job on my fingernails, why am I going to go back?
Right.
If I drank raw milk from this person and they weren't handling properly and it made me sick, am I going to go back to them for milk?
Right.
And I'm going to tell people, don't go to them for milk. That milk made me sick, right?
Right, exactly. That is how the free market works. I mean, it's pretty simple. Like, you work, you make your paycheck, you get to spend that money how you want. And if someone wants to make money, they offer a service and they try to do better than the person next to them and make the business.
So there's no reason to license or anybody because I mean, and you could make that same argument for a doctor. It's just that people don't like the doctor. If the doctor doesn't make you well, there's no need to license the doctor. If the doctor doesn't make you well, you sue, or he kills somebody or she, you sue them. There's a way to handle all of this stuff. So when you really stop and think about it, it has nothing to do with protecting you. It has everything to do with a revenue stream.
Right. I mean, there are many ways that it's just another way I mean, the government makes so much money. I don't know, why do we have to pay to renew our car tags? I think that's the dumbest thing in the world. Things like
because
this.
they need money.
Exactly. I get it. Maybe the argument is we keep up with and make sure their registration's current and they're legal on the road and all this. But you could also just pull someone over, and if they don't have insurance, you got them.
But here's my other point to that. So what did they use? And we've talked about this on the program numerous times because I despise this so much. The Real ID, the flock cameras, the surveillance, just the surveillance of American citizens, I absolutely am done with. I've had enough of it. And so you can make that argument, and we've done that with Representative Gann. Made that comment, made that point. You don't, the way they got the flock cameras in was by saying you had to have insurance for non-insured motorists. What insurance company doesn't allow you to carry insurance for a non-insured motorist? They want your money. Every insurance company is going to allow you to do this. If you don't have the money to do that and you're willing to accept the risk, or you don't even want to because you're willing to accept the risk in that, why should the government force you to do that? Yeah. The only reason we have uninsured motorists is so that flock cameras can come in and surveil you.
Yeah. And I'm certainly against flock cameras. It was interesting, though, to see this because you've got the sheriff's associations and DA's associations and even some sheriffs and law enforcement behind it. And the Conservative Party is the Conservative Party of pro-law enforcement. So if you're against flock cameras, then you're anti-police. There's always a way that they can get you for it,
But that's not funny. That's 100%. You're absolutely 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the problem with law enforcement is so many of them aren't for us anymore. I mean, they're militarized. They're hammers looking for nails. They're not looking to protect me. They're looking to get me. So I'm not on that bandwagon. Sandra says, wait, so they're telling me we don't have the money to upgrade wastewater treatment plants and stop toxic dumping of human manure, or even buy a PFAS testing machine for $1 million, but we'll spend $100 million on a new computer system for DHS?
And all the computer system was going to do was put all the resources into one place, food stamps, WIC. I'm like, that doesn't cost $100 million. That shouldn't even cost $1 million. I can go get a subscription to Wix and make my own website and put all the links onto a page, like they were not convincing me.
Yeah, like, but I think what you had alluded to, and I will say it, I will just say it. I think that was all about we have $100 million shortfall in our budget and we just want that money back. Free market or lobbyist payoffs, or a car. I don't need to pay so that I can be tracked. Oh, but wait, they're trying to exempt the cities from liability. No suing for you, commoners. And there's several bills that I think you've probably seen this legislative session that are literally exempting the problem. They're exempting the people who are putting human manure down. They're exempting the people who are creating problems, but they're exempting them. And then how does that protect the liberty of the people?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, I can be favors. Sure, it could be lobbyists. I don't take lobbyist money or PAC money, so I don't, I wouldn't know how much they're offering who or what, but it could be the lobbyist money or PAC money that the group is offering you, or they could, I mean, these groups lobbying have a lot of money. They could send someone down and bring an expert. If you want to run a bill next year and get it passed, you vote yes on our bill that we want. We'll make sure you get that bill passed next year and that you get that. We'll send experts your way to go lobby for it, to teach you how to argue it in committee. I mean, there's so many ways they can benefit you if you do what they want you to do first. And there are certainly conservative lobbyists or groups that I might talk with OK2A or, I've talked with OCPA. I don't take any money from any of them, but if I want to go out and find resources to get something done, I can do it without being paid for it. I can go get those resources or go get help from conservatives, grassroots groups, and so I don't know. Like I'm saying, there are some conservative lobbyist groups. I'm not going after any legislators that work with or take a check from or support from OK2A or things like that. Those are good groups. I just kind of made that commitment myself that I wasn't going to do lobbyists or PAC groups when I launched my campaign. And so, but there are ways that they can influence you in different ways or make deals or make promises. I mean, we've seen, legislators in DC or in Oklahoma City compromise on certain bills that, in committee, in a Senate committee, I forgot what senator it was, but there was one senator running some sort of bill in a committee, or maybe it was on the floor, and others commented that it was very clear the senator didn't want to run this bill. But then they figured out that he was doing it as a favor for another senator so that he could get a different bill later down the road, like things like that. Because they said he visibly looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to run this legislation, but he needed to if someone was going to get what they wanted down the road. Things like that. I mean, it's just kind of a backwards system. I think Oklahoma's heading in the right direction about getting it on track, though. We saw a lot of incumbents being unseated. We got new people. We have to keep that traction going. We've seen some GOPs on the local level be flipped and new leadership. Maybe that's a fresh start. Maybe that's what we need. We brought Trump back into office. So we're on the path to getting things done, but we have to keep this trajectory going. There's more work to be done. I think grassroots people and groups are stepping up and seeing results from it. But at the end of the day, it's a long game. There's 101 seats in the House, and there's about half of those in the Senate. It's a slow process. You got to work with legislators. You got to get to know them. You got to be invested in the process and watch and pull the votes and ask questions and see why they voted this way or that way. So it's easier to live a comfortable life and not be invested in it and just kind of let the world happen around you. But then we pay for it down the road when we do that. And it's too late, and the government comes knocking on your door and accusing you of something you didn't do and turns your life upside down because we were asleep the whole time before that.
That was extremely well said. That was extremely well said. And you know, the people that was extremely well said. I know that we're not going to I think one of the most shocking things I ever heard was I was talking to a history expert one time, and he said I said something like, and this was way back in the day now, and I said something like, we just need another American Revolution. We just don't have enough people yet. And he looked at me and he said something like, did you realize that only I think it was less than a third of the population, it was some really small number, like a quarter of the population, actually were the ones that fought the revolution. Everybody else was too kind. They were getting their stuff sent over from Europe. You know what I'm saying? They didn't want to have a fight with those people. They were getting their chintz, oh, but my brocade and my chintz won't come from my, my curtains. They didn't care, about that kind of thing. And I remember thinking at the time, well, number one, I had no idea about that. And number two, well, Dawn says 3. Ooh, wow, 3. Why did I think it was 33? Maybe because I thought that was more reasonable. I don't know. But if it only took 3% of the population at the time of the United States to overthrow King George and send him back home with his with his wig between his legs, why would we not think we couldn't do the same thing now?
We could. I mean, you look at the Nitze corridor that was trying to come all the way through the state of Oklahoma. Yeah. I mean, there was 1,000 people that showed up. That is just a percentage of Oklahomans, and they got that shut down because they organized. They showed up. They vocalized their opinion. They were consistent with what they wanted. They studied what they needed to study. So we could definitely see stuff like that happen, and that type of that's kind of another more recent example of something like that. I mean, that was probably less than 1% of that district out there,
Oh, that's an absolute fact. And I do think it's a little hard to overcome, the love of money. And we've talked about these leases that these, green companies want to put out and give people. But on my podcast on Wednesday, when Trent made me completely lose the ability for my brain to even function, he talked about how that they were using these leases to mortgage the property to make money to get the materials for their project. Which made me I just couldn't even speak, because how does that happen? And that would somehow be legal, but then the people just didn't read this easement that they were signing. Yeah. And, could very well lose their entire property if that mortgage of their property went down because of the person financing it. So,
for the wind turbines and stuff too, aren't they also signing NDAs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That should tell you something.
Carr Homestead, unfortunately, the two primary private companies are still pushing the corridor. It's just not from the federal government.
Yeah, there's another corridor project going for sure. I've heard that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got to be vigilant and okay, we're coming up on an hour and 30. What do you have you pretty much closed us out a minute ago with your speech about getting involved, but if there's anything else that you want to throw at us before we get off of here for the weekend, I am happy to hear it. You've just been a joy to interview. I mean, good night. It's so nice to know that there are people there up at the Capitol who understand the reason they're there.
Yeah, I think that it's really experiences and life experiences that really make, I think, really strong soldiers for battle, so to speak. we were raised conservative, but it wasn't until we saw the government come in and threaten my family with everything and do that that's kind of what drives me, because I've seen how bad it can get. Like, we've experienced government tyranny in Wagner County, I would say, from elected officials that violate the Constitution and can essentially get away with it because of the badge they're wearing. What pushed people towards the Revolutionary War? They were tired of being pushed around by another country across the pond. And what caused the Civil War? There was tension about slavery and other people being pushed around and controlled by other groups. It's going to take a rude awakening for people to get very involved. So when you find a candidate that has had a life experience and the outcome of that is that they want stronger conservative values, and that was the result of it, it's great. You want to post on social media about them, you want to support them, but the way you're going to win those seats is if you donate and door knock. So I see a lot of people be very passionate about, we're going to unseat this person, we're going to primary this person, or we're going to support this candidate, we want you to run for office. If you're not going to donate or door knock, preferably door knock, just save it. I don't know. You're not going to get that person into that seat. If you don't, you win elections by door knocking. Dusty Devers raised $4,000, and that was it. And he won his campaign because his whole church went out and door knocked for him. And I raised maybe $27,000. Dean Davis, $127,000. I door knocked 4 times as much as Dean Davis. Kevin Wallace spent $1 million against Jim Shaw. Jim Shaw had his wife and his kids and friends out door knocking. So channel that passion, and you talk about wanting to see reform and justice, and you talk about wanting to get your priorities and get that executed and actually carried out. Pick a candidate, adopt that candidate, and commit to go out and door knock for them 2 days a month until the end of their election or something. Or say, I can't get out there and door knock, but I'm going to give you this donation to do a mailer, or you find a door knocker that can volunteer, a high school kid that wants to make $10 an hour. And they'll be my door knocker, and I'm sponsoring, and I'm giving you this amount of money to your campaign for a door knocker, whatever it is, or I'm going to make phone calls and stuff like that. But these elections are going to be won by door knocking. So that passion we get, certainly, share on social media. That stretches far too, but that's not going to win an election. Feet on the ground, knocking at the door, the name they hear at the door, the person that came to the door. How many people I had that said they're going to vote for me because I was the only candidate that showed up to their door? As long as I was Republican, they're like, well, you're the only one that showed up, so I'll be voting for you. So I think we are getting to a place where people are taking that more seriously. So if you find yourself and you find people getting passionate about it, encourage them to channel that passion into putting their boots on the ground and getting out and volunteering. I promise you, the only way that we're going to get the right people in office is if people get out and door knock. On the state level, when it comes to House and Senate districts, that's just how it happens. That's just how it works. So.
Wow. Well said. That was great. Okay. Just a couple of quick things. Select few for the working for the people and not the lobbyists. It does give a little hope to those of us who are sick of the establishment. And then Margie Raber sums that all up by saying, we appreciate Gabe in Tulsa County. So, and she was one of your door knockers. So
yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I have a little bit of Tulsa County in my district too. So love hearing from you guys.
Well, Gabe, it's been a joy to have you on. It usually is. I mean, when we had you on before, it was a joy, although you made me speechless a couple of times. So, thank you for all that you're doing. And I know that so many of us appreciate seeing your tweets and your, the information that you put out. It's just very enlightening and makes us feel like we're part of the process that we know we're being shut out of on purpose. So it is huge, and we really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
And guys, thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate you as usual. And it looks like it's going to be a little rainy this weekend, but go out still and have a good time and enjoy yourself. And then Monday, we got to get right back to it and paying attention to what these people are doing at 23rd and Lincoln, because if we're not going to take it from them, if we're not going to take our power back, they will take it from us. And we've already seen this week what tyranny looks like. So let's commit to getting right back at it after having this weekend. And I'll see you all again on Wednesday at 9 a.m. when Laura says, I came in at the end, but I'll go back and watch it in full. Thanks for doing this. Well, we thank you for coming in. Thank you so much. And don't forget, you can always find these on our YouTube and our Rumble channel. It'll go off of Facebook. It cycles off of Facebook. And some of the other channels X, but you can find them all the time on our Rope Report YouTube channel and our Rope Report Rumble channel. So go there and find those, and that's where you can share those. So, and John Boy says, get out and do that garden. So thanks again for being with us. We'll see you Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. with Robert Bortons, and we'll talk to you then. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.